Hello, welcome back to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the latest episode of the Milner and Musgrove show with him, Sam Milner, and me, Andrew Musgrove. Thank you very much for tuning in. As always, this episode is sponsored by NordVPN. So do make sure you click the link in the podcast description box and take advantage of a discounted offer on your NordVPN plan. One subscription, 10 devices, and there's no risk with a NordVPN subscription, as is a 30-day money-back guarantee. Perfect if you're browsing on public Wi-Fi to keep yourself safe, all your details secure from the potential hackers lurking in the shadows. So support the podcast and keep yourself safe online. Sam, welcome back to the podcast. How are you keeping? You well? I know you're very, very busy, so we do appreciate you sparing the time to pop back onto the show.
Yeah, I always make time, even though it's busy. I've just come off air on Pluto TV. Just made my way back from the studio to my hotel room. Not wanting to give my location or the brand away, but when you travel, it is nice to lodge. But yeah, it's busy, and the international break is still here, although the finish line is in sight of that one. And yeah, attention shifts now to Brighton, and but yeah, no, all good, and my NordVPN is working well on my public Wi-Fi.
There you go. Keeping yourself nice and safe and secure. Well, we're going to talk about a former Newcastle United player today. I'm not going to call him the star because he never achieved that status at Newcastle United. Some might argue he hasn't actually achieved it at his current club yet, but there's definitely potential to do so. And it is Elliot Anderson, the sale that no one wanted to happen, but the sale Newcastle United had to push through to avoid a point deduction when it comes to the dreaded good old PSR. He has really come on at Nottingham Forest. He's in the England squad. He's winning caps, and he does look like he's got a huge future ahead of him. That has led Sam to the inevitable, that old romantic Hollywood-esque kind of script where Elliot Anderson in a couple of years comes back to Newcastle United, even as early as the summer for some. There is no buyback clause. Some people hoped there would be, but given the situation Newcastle found themselves in, they weren't in any position to really ask for it. Otherwise, the deal might not have gone through, and it might have been a points deduction. There's a lot to get into when it comes to Elliot Anderson and any potential return to Newcastle United. I'll begin, Sam, with just asking you in a sentence to sum up your thoughts on the subject of a potential return to Newcastle United for Elliot Anderson.
It would be nice. I've got to admit, though, or how brief. Hang on, no, that was a sentence. It would be nice is a sentence. So, do you want me to elaborate or not?
Yeah, feel free.
Okay. Yeah, it would be nice, but life's all about timing. And it's a subject that I find irritating. There's so much nonsense around with these online outlets, and there was months of speculation which was so unnecessary. I mean, it boils my pee more than hotel kettles, but it's one of them. There was never any buyback clause. It was not as it just wasn't there. So why on earth were so many people trying to regurgitate and try and make out that there was? I don't get it. So it's not a subject that I'm enthused about, because like I say, life is about timing, and the way he was at Newcastle, he would not be in the position he is now, i.e. England international, Premier League star, if he stayed, and that's the harsh reality of the situation he was in, the club were in. Yes, the situation stank and still does, but Elliot's done really well for himself, and it's been great to see. Painful to see, yes, I fully admit, but it's all about timing. These things happen, and when the time arose that he would have potentially got his chance, he got injured as well, and there stepped forward Lewis Miley.
Indeed, and I think that is the truth that a lot of people don't want to face up to, maybe don't want to admit, even though they know it deep down inside, is that had he stayed at Newcastle United last season, he would not have got in ahead of Tonali, Bruno, or Joe Linton, with everyone fit and firing. As you mentioned, Lewis Miley also stepped up a level. We know Eddie Howe has got a particular liking for Joe Willock as well. And right now, say he came back in January, say he came back in the summer, other than Joe Willock, the midfielders they've got are likely still to be here next season. And there's no guarantee whatsoever that Elliot Anderson would come back and get into the first team. And I think what's key here is to look at it maybe from his point of view as well. He's gone to Forest. He's played 37 Premier League games last season, so missed just the one. He's played 7 so far this season. Whereas at Newcastle the season before it was 21. The season before that it was 22. Now, yes, he had injuries to deal with, but those numbers tell you something. He's been given a first team opportunity in Nottingham Forest and he's absolutely flourished. But had he stayed on Tyneside, and if he did indeed return in the near future, there's no guarantee he'd get anywhere near those numbers.
It depends on so many things. There are a lot of variables. You mentioned there how likes Joe Willock. Does he? I would put it to you. Are you sure? That has to, Willock's form needs to seriously increase. He's not the first option off the bench these days. Jacob Ramsey is back fit, but he is slightly injury prone, as that form would suggest from his time at Villa. But time is of the essence because we're in a handy PSR position. We have to go on and maintain a charge for Champions League and start being consistent because, like you say, there might not be a case for Elliot Anderson to come back. It'd be great to see him back, but we're at a point now where it's a squad game. We obviously want to keep it that way because that means we're European regulars and so on. Forest are in a tricky moment because of the owner sacking Nuno when he was doing a fantastic job, and rumours are already swirling that Ange Postecoglou was on his way out and Sean Dyche may come in. I'm not really sure what to make of that. It just seems like an absolute mess of things. So there'll be question marks about Elliot. There'll be question marks about Morgan Gibbs-White. There'll be question marks about Danilo Milenkovic and so many others. It's a really talented squad they've got at Nottingham Forest. So yeah, I think a big move will probably happen in the summer. I would be surprised if it happened in January, but I think it'll happen in the summer. But it's going to cost someone a real pretty penny because we sold him for 15 mil net, including what we had to shell out then for Vakadimos. So that whole situation stank the place out. And it just goes to show, we've regurgitated this before about PSR not being fit for purpose. Therein lies the prime example. So yeah, but it's about timing and what we want yet again. If Willock can't rediscover his form, is he then available in the summer to, I don't know, a Crystal Palace, a Fulham, a Bournemouth, whoever, someone like that? Because he's still a very talented player, just hasn't hit the form lines hard enough for the last year or so. And then there is a potential space there for Elliot Anderson to return to go alongside Lewis Miley in his progression, who is probably first choice midfielder off the bench now, and probably was last season as well, to be honest. So, which is what you want to see, because you don't want Lewis Miley to be an Elliot Anderson in that he goes and flourishes and goes on to become a fully fledged England international and blossom away from his hometown club.
Yeah, I mean, we welcome that in many ways. Not the fact that he's left Newcastle United, but the fact that it's worked out so well, because it is great to see. You look at it, and obviously Bruno and Tonali are dead certs in that starting 11. Joe Linton is one that is creating a little bit of debate, and with Jacob Ramsey hopefully back to full fitness very, very soon, there's questions over maybe whether Joe Linton's place isn't as secure as it once was. I have to be honest, I keep kind of going back and forth myself over this, because I felt first half against Nottingham Forest, I thought he was really, really good. Other games, he's kind of been passed around, passed through even. And obviously Ramsey offers something a little bit different. But I suppose if you're looking at where Anderson would have an opportunity to maybe get into that midfield three, it would be out on that left. And is that his strongest position, you think?
I don't know, would it? It depends. Like I say, it's a squad game. If you don't have European football and domestic cups to balance, good runs in the domestic cups, I mean, of course, but then, your first choice midfield is your first choice midfield. And yes, Joe Linton is the weakest of the three, but he's pretty rock solid still. He's a miss when he's not there. We notice him when he's not there. So yes, okay, he's not probably putting in stellar performances like Tonali and Bruno are, but he's still a noticeable miss when he doesn't play. So it's an interesting one. So that's why it's all about the squad game now, because there are opportunities. Players do need to be rested. We've got some crucial, real key fixtures coming up in the Champions League. And a really competitive tie in the Carabao as well. You want to progress and put in a real good sort of title defense, if you like. So that's what it's about going forward. If Elliot wants to come back, I don't doubt for 1 second Eddie Howe would love to have him back. It's etched upon his face every time he's asked about it that he is borderline furious with that situation. But again, that's a rule thing, and you can play the blame game all you want, but either way, the rule absolutely stinks. Whether that's a Dan Ashworth blame or Amanda Staveley blame or whatever, that we got into that position, overspending. Not overspend. Well, yes, overspending against the rule, essentially. It is what it is. It's long gone now. The same as for our weekend opponents, Brighton with Minter. At that time, Minter, you could probably say, would have had more of a chance than Anderson in the first team, because Almiron wasn't firing at the time. Murphy was hot and cold, and Minter was there primed to potentially stake a claim for a first team spot. In the end, Murphy kicked on and found another level and had a tremendous season last campaign. And we've since purchased Alanga. So at the time, you would have made more of a case for Minter than you would have done for Anderson. The whole thing that's just a kind of kicker is that he got injured when he did in that injury plagued campaign where we were missing players left, right, and centre. And unfortunately for Elliot, he was one of them when that was his opportune moment to cement his place and kick on from there.
Because he had a really good pre-season, didn't he? That everyone kind of maybe even expected him to start against Villa, I think it was, and it didn't happen. And then, like you say, he picked up that injury. But the rotation question's really, really interesting, because a few people who responded to my plea on X to get in touch about whether they'd like to see Elliot Anderson back, whether they think it'll happen, or whether it's that kind of romantic idea of one of our own coming back to St James's. A few people have said, well, look, there are 50 plus, 60 plus games to play. There will be time for him to appear in the first team. But if you look at how Eddie Howe picks his team, Tonali's pretty much going to play in most games, you would think. Yes, he rested Bruno against Bournemouth, but that midfield is kind of going to be probably the most regular section of the team when you look elsewhere in the positions. So yes, you'd get first team opportunities, but how many of them there would be regularly? And are you going to give that up when you are playing for Nottingham Forest week in, week out at such a tender age is another question. And I think I go back to a point I made earlier. I'm not sure he would accept the move right now, because there is no guarantee of first team football. If he gets an opportunity to go elsewhere where they go, yeah, you're going to be one of our midfield two, one of our midfield three, you can kind of build a team around you. I think that's obviously that is more appealing to Elliot Anderson, rather than come back to Newcastle and try and take on Tonali, try and take on Bruno, try and take on Jacob Ramsey. I think he might want a bit more of a guarantee than that. Not that you can guarantee that in football, of course, but I think you get the point that I'm making. In terms of other people's opinions, Sam, I'll read you some off X. So thank you to everyone who's got in touch. Quite a few people saying actually he wouldn't get into the team now. So Craig replied and said he still wouldn't get in our team. He had to leave to develop. We need to stop rewriting history. He is gone and we need to let him go and wish him well. Lee said, I'd love to see him back, but he's benefiting massively from regular football. He doesn't get in our side. Let him thrive. wouldn't have happened if he had stayed. Eddie says the fact that he's one of our own is a bonus, but not the driving factor. We benefit massively from having a quality rotation option in the midfield. Anderson offers something Ramsey and Miley don't, and Bruno, Sandro, and Joe Linton simply can't play every game. So it's a big yes from me. And Sir Jason Toon says in 4 years' time because he's not ready now. Anything you want to pick up on there, Sam?
Yeah, I think it's a wave of really good comments there. And what I would say that Ramsey has mentioned there, he's the equivalent from Aston Villa's perspective. Were we the rival Villa podcast that you hold in high regard and in high esteem, in 12 months' time, we could have been saying, well, Ramsey's gone up to Newcastle, and now he's playing for England because he's worked under Howe, and we had to sell him. So it's one of them where Villa are in the same situation because of not PSR but the UEFA wage cap that they so massively overspent on. Villa, instead of choosing not to trade for 3 windows essentially like we did, they went to try and trade their way out of PSR, which worked for PSR, but of course didn't work for wages, because then they've got a whole wave of signing on fees, agents fees, and all the other fees that come with all the transfers and all the business that they've done. So, excuse me, but for Elliot, he wouldn't be in our first choice midfield, would he? There's no two ways about it. So, yeah, it's an interesting one, and of course there are plenty of other midfielders out there when the time comes that we need to add to it. And like you say, Tonali is an absolute animal. Bruno is turning into such a fantastic captain. I was skeptical when he got given the armband. I'll hold my hands up. I probably said it on here as well. But he's fantastic. You follow him into battle, wouldn't you? And he's really grown to it, along with the guidance of your Trippiers, your Burns of this world. So it's one of these things. It's football. It's great to see him kick on and develop. But yeah, he was probably put in his place a little bit against when we played them at St James's the last time out, and obviously he gave the penalty away, so he's still doing bits for us in that sense. But yeah, look, he's a really great talent, and it'll be interesting because he's also been linked to Manchester United. So his next move, or it's a test of character for him, because do you bide your time at Forest and continue your fantastic progress in a team that may be starting to struggle and slip down the table and are in a bit of bother at the bottom? Do you go for a kind of underperforming giant of a club that will come to you and say, right, young Elliot, here's more money than you know what to do with. Come and play for us for 5 years, and you'll probably ruin your career doing so. But do you sort of cash out? Or is there a plan C that Newcastle or an equally ambitious side, maybe even an Aston Villa, come in and try and take him in so he can continue his progression?
Yeah, I wouldn't be moving to Manchester United, to be honest. I'd stick at
No, of
Forest.
course you wouldn't, but it's a possibility.
Oh, it is. They've the other side been linked, but they seem to be linked to every good young player with this sense of entitlement that they will indeed manage to sign them. I think if Forest managed to avoid the drop, I would stick at Forest for a couple of years, even without European football. I think just having that exposure to the Premier League week in, week out at 22 is the main thing for Elliot Anderson. Obviously, he wants European football, that helped him get into the England squad, etc., etc. But I think it's really key that he doesn't move somewhere where he's not going to be, as best he can be, guaranteed first team football, and that includes Newcastle United. But you mentioned it earlier about Eddie Howe, and we know what Eddie Howe does and doesn't do, and he very rarely talks about other teams' players. And he broke cover a couple of weeks back about Elliot Anderson. And he was asked about, potentially seeing him back. And he said, I don't know if he will come back, but certainly from my perspective, I would love him too. I'm very respectful of the fact he is at another football club, and I would never normally talk about a player in that way. So I won't change that stance. But yes, it is very regretful that he had to be sold. So what did you make of his comments? But I guess the first question, Sam, is what did you make of the fact that Eddie Howe did something and he says that he doesn't usually do, and talks about someone else's player.
Eye-opening, wasn't it? But it's a unique situation in that he was his player, and because of the massive regret in finding ourselves in that situation where we had to sell two of our best young and up and coming players, probably feels like he is sort of still our player somewhat. But in order to get him back now, you're probably looking at another club record deal, and is. I suppose, for want of a better phrase, it's going to sound harsh, but is he worth it at the end of the day? Is he worth breaking the club record to bring back? I don't know. At this stage, he could well prove to be, and it would be great to see. And on the England thing as well, there's by no means he's guaranteed. Whilst he's in the squad now and doing very well, there's by no means he makes the plane to the World Cup, because obviously there's Bellingham to come back in, and there's a whole host of dilemmas for Thomas Tuchel to sort of decipher, and he's not got long left to do it. But he's put himself, Anderson, in a fantastic position, and it is not always nice to see these sort of players, young players, do so well. But there's so many kind of variables. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see it progress, but. For the moment, he's not our player, and we watch him from afar, don't we?
So just on how we think he was just simply answering a question, no dark tricks going on.
What in that he spoke about another dark tricks because he spoke about another team's player.
Yeah, it's just something he doesn't do. You know what I mean? Just doesn't do it in front to do.
Yeah, but they've had that relationship. They've had that relationship. So he probably feels some sort of kind of I don't necessarily parental relationship, but that kind of close tie that they would have had, and Eddie Howe would have loved developing him, and he would have got a lot from it, because Anderson has such fantastic potential, as he is realizing. So I think that's probably what it is, that he still has that probably emotional connection to that of Elliot. So I think that's why he's done it, maybe without realizing. Maybe it wasn't wholly intentional. Maybe the emotional side of things just kind of got the better of him when asked, when posed that question.
You mentioned the price tag. I mean, you probably are looking at least £80 million, if not a bit more. And it's cracking that you asked that question about, is he worth it? Let us know in the comments your thoughts on what you would like to see Newcastle United pay for Elliot Anderson, if indeed a deal could be struck. Sam, do we just have to be a little bit careful that, and I'm sure it's very easy for those in charge at Newcastle United to be this careful, but I'm talking about as fans and commentators, that we don't get tied up in that emotion of one of our own coming back.
Yeah, because is he worth 80 million? No, of course he's not. So in that sense, are you really going to spend all of that PSR headroom on top of, I mean, it's a decision for Ross Wilson, isn't it, who has just come from, lo and behold, Nottingham Forest. So he would have been in those negotiations which have had our pants down. So there's so many interesting form lines in with this story as well, because he'll know full well what Elliot's on, and what kind of incentives there are in his package, and would have had a big conversation with him in getting him to leave Newcastle. And there was that great scene as well when we won the cup, that Elliot was in the crowd watching on. So there's a lot of PSI headroom. Some of that you would hope would be used in giving new contracts to Tonali, Livramento, Lewis Hall. Who am I missing?
Bruno.
That's not a necessity, but
no.
Yeah.
But it's been rumoured.
Yeah, Botman was the one I was after. Botman, Livramento, Tonali are the big three. Maybe Hall you'd put in there as well as the big 3 or 4 that are kind of more sort of crucial than that of Bruno at the moment, because he only signed one 2 summers ago. 2 summers ago it wasn't it? So that's not as urgent. Whereas you're getting towards urgent for particularly Botman. And it'd be great to see Tonali tied down as well, because those two in particular, and Livramento, the way he was going before his injury, they were getting to become those upper tier top class footballers. Tonali for me is world class. And if Botman can stay fit and injury free, he is world class. So those are the players you want to tie down and avoid any other situations like we had in the summer just gone.
Yep, indeed. And hopefully that happens sooner rather than later. Just to finish off then, Sam, what does the future hold for Elliot Anderson? Do you see him returning to Newcastle United in the next 2-3 seasons?
Not if he's going to cost 80 million. I think he will move in the summer, because if Forest, I mean, look, they're in the bottom three, so relegation is a proposition. So if they go down, Anderson, the players I mentioned from that squad, Gibbs, White, Danilo, Milenkovic, they will go. So they will be really vulnerable and susceptible to losing players, but they will come at a premium. So if it's going to be 80+ million, there is no chance whatsoever he returns. He will probably end up at a Manchester United who have more money than sense. Despite being over £1 billion in debt, they can continue to spend whatever they like. So if he was at a price of, I don't know, 60, then Eddie Howe may well want to have that conversation. But I don't know. That's not for us to get bogged down in transfer fees. He's worth what someone is willing to pay for him. Obviously, we're at the receiving end of a very bad deal, but the guy who brokered that for Forest is now on our team. So it'll be very interesting going forward. My head says he won't return.
Yeah, I agree. I think it would be nice. It would be. It has that, as I said, Hollywood kind of script feeling to it that he would return, but I just don't think it'd be right for him. I don't think it'd be right for Newcastle United if they hold on to the midfielders they've got, and if the price tag is north of £80 million, which in today's market it probably will be. 2 goals last season, and yes, it's not necessarily about all the goals. It's about kind of starting the moves or the transition, the roles he has in that, and breaking up play, which he's very good at. You'd like to see a few more goals for that price tag as well, though.
It's a good point. He does need to add more goals to his game. So he absolutely does. That's one thing where he is lacking a little bit. He absolutely does need to add more goals to his game.
Yeah, certainly so. But he's been a fantastic start for Forest, and long may it continue, except when Newcastle face them at the City Ground, whenever that may be this season. I'm not so confident he will leave in the summer, but if he does, I don't think it'll be to Newcastle United. But you never know. Stranger things have happened in football. Sam, thank you very much for popping on to the podcast and talking about Elliot Anderson. To you guys watching and listening, thank you very much for tuning in. Let me point you in the direction of tomorrow's special episode with Mark Crothers, and I'm sure Sam's going to partake in this Newcastle United starting 11 challenge. Sam, I want you to pick your best Newcastle United starting 11, but you can only choose one player from the manager that either brought them to the club or brought them through the ranks. So if you pick Shearer, you can't have anybody else that Kevin Keegan signed. If you pick James Milner, you can't have anyone else that's Bobby signed, and so on and so on. That episode comes out on Wednesday morning, both on YouTube and on the podcast. Sam's going to go away and pick his team and hopefully share that with you guys later on. Thank you as always for tuning in, and I will catch you very soon.